And that's really not what that says either.
No, it
It's
doesn't.
cheaper than rebuying it though.
I'm gonna have another one.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How's everybody doing? We're going to ask if Johnny Williams and Christian Stewart can join us here at the podium. Come on down. We want to thank you all for joining us this evening for marching toward the holiday, an evening with the Honorables Wilma J and Wellington E. Webb. Let's give them a hand. As we have said on several occasions, this is a anniversary of 40 years, 56 years, and 60 years. It's the 40th year of the holiday and House Bill 1201 being passed here in Colorado. And it is the 56th commemoration of Dr. King's sacrifice, which took place 56 years ago in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's the 60th year of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The ironic thing is that it took 13 years to get the bill passed in Colorado due to the work of Mayor Mayor Webb and Mrs. Webb, as well as 13 years from the time Dr. King started the civil rights movement as we know it up till the time that we are commemorating today. Now, we're going to have Mrs. Webb come and join us, Mayor Webb as well. And we were going to have a short discussion, but Mrs. Webb was ready before we thought she was about how we used to march. Johnny and I marched with Umoja. And we were marching, getting the holiday. Uh, we were the boots on the ground, we say, as Mrs. Webb and Mayor Webb, at the time, Senator Webb, were working in the state house to get the holiday passed. And Johnny and I, we would tell you, I only had him the mic, how we would meet at the Dr. Martin Luther King Monument in Denver City Park, and we would march over to Macedonia Baptist Church or Manual High Street. And what happened next?
Well, after that, several years we worked back and forth going to those two, and Dr. Lisa Phillips informed us that there's no way that we weren't getting anything done because the laws were not made at Manual or Macedonia, that we needed to go down to the State House. So that following year, we went downtown to the Capitol, and that was the first year that we were able to march down without permission that first year to the Capitol. Then after that, Frederick Pena offered us 16th Avenue, and we went down 16th Avenue and didn't get much momentum from the community. So that following year, we went back to Colfax, and from that day forward, we've been marching down Colfax before it became a holiday, to make it a holiday, and we're going to continue marching to celebrate the holiday.
And Mrs. Webb will take us from here. Dr. Terry Nelson, the vice chair of the commission, was going to introduce the Webbs. However, do they need introducing? I mean, seriously, right? They're both, if you were to Google them, you'll see that they're both history makers. They've actually had documentaries done on them about the history and everything. And if you notice, the title of the event is An Evening with the Honorables Yes, sir. Talk about, Christian, do you have your mic? Talk about how you first introduced the legislation with the for the Dr. King holiday and what it was that prompted you to even do so.
Well, me being elected to the legislature was a highlight for me, for my family, for all of us involved, because I've always said I was the most unlikely candidate to be elected. And I've always challenged young people that this is their time to make a difference within their community. My parents came from a family of modest means. My mother was a homemaker. Dad worked on the railroad. They came up through the Depression. He never finished high school. My mother had an addiction issue with alcohol. But I withstood that with their love and encouragement in order to get the degrees necessary in the political involvement from the two most important people in my life, both my grandmother, who set the character and understanding the dignity of what it takes to be a good human being and then running for office, and also not being afraid of standing up for the things that are right. The other person that I married, Wilma Webb, I think is the person that all credit goes to in terms of the King holiday, because without her tenacity, without her resilience, we wouldn't have a King holiday. And if we had one, it would be quite different than the one that was passed. As the husband and the spouse, I had to hear and see the tears when she came home, where people had promised to vote for the holiday, and then when the vote came, they didn't. I had to see and hear the stories of minority elected officials that said they were going to support the bill and didn't vote against it. They just weren't present when the vote came up to vote for it, because they wanted to introduce their own bills that were less than the bill that Wilma had introduced. Some bills were only wanted to be adopted only for school kids. Other bills were just for local government. And Wilma's bill was saying that I want the same thing for King as we have for any other holiday, no more, no less. And when it came time for those people that said that we need to have too many holidays, she merged Lincoln and Washington so that there wouldn't be an excess of holidays. So when I went in the legislature, my goal was to try to make a difference. I went in with the attitude that coming from being from the east side, that if I called a banker for a bank meeting, he probably wouldn't show up. But if I was a state representative calling him for a bank meeting and on the finance committee, most likely he would show up. And so I understood the power of being elected. My goal was to take on all the issues that other people didn't want to take on. The King holiday was one. We started out with a resolution. The first resolution was introduced by State Senator George Brown in 1972. I introduced the resolution in 1973. This was followed upon the heels of the national legislation that had been introduced by Congressman John Conyers in Michigan, who introduced the King holiday bill several months after King was assassinated, with it first coming up in January 15th on his birthday the following year. And 15 years later was later passed with Katie Hall as the sponsor, who was from Gary, Indiana, along with John Conyers. So my goal was to get the bill passed. I introduced a resolution and found out the resolution was going to be just as difficult as the bill. So I said, so why am I trying to do the resolution? Why don't I just take a shot and go for the full holiday? And I introduced the bill in 73, 74, 75, 76, each of those years. And the bill only passed out of the House once, and that was the year that Democrats had the majority in 1977. And Ruben Valdez left the machine open for 30 minutes in order for us to try to get 33 votes, because it takes 33 votes in the House to get the bill passed, 18 votes in the Senate to get it passed, so that something can then become a law. 20 minutes later, after begging people to vote for it and having to attempt to get many liberals, Democrats to vote for it, who I thought would be a slam dunk and found out they weren't, and conservative Republicans, the coalition at that point in time was very, very difficult. And so there were some people that would always stand out in my mind that voted for the bill, like a Betty Neal, who was a Republican who didn't have to, and some other Democrats from Pueblo that didn't have to, but they did anyway. And after several attempts, and I moved on from my mammoth salary of making $7,600 a year as a state legislator with 4 kids and a wife, and being offered a job making $42,500 a year working for Jimmy Carter as the regional administrator for Health and Human Services. I thought it was time to move on to do something different. State Representative King Trimble, who was part of our political family, then took my place. And then he stayed in the legislature for a very short period of time because he wanted to be on city council, which opened up the seat again in District 8. There was a lot of controversy at that time as to who was going to take on District 8 and who was going to run. When I ran for District 8, there were 5 people running. After the convention, I was the only one running, based upon the votes that people gave me and based upon the speech I made at the convention. When Wilma ran for the vacancy committee and also for the position, and this is especially pointed to the women, I was astonished that how many people initially said they weren't going to vote for Wilma because she was Wellington's wife. Didn't have anything to do with what her record was, didn't have anything to do with what she had done. But for all the people like Terry Nelson and others that knew Wilma from high school, they knew how competitive, how smart, and what a great speaker she was. So 5 people were running for the state rep seat as well for District 8. Wilma was the last one to speak. Dr. Howard, after Wilma spoke,
Yes, sir.
guess how many people were running for that seat?
1.
One, Wilma Webb. All the rest of them decided to drop out.
Yeah.
They said they don't want no part of that. And she carried that with her to the Colorado House of Representatives. I think the state of Colorado is indeed indebted to Wilma's sacrifice, Wilma giving up time away from family, time away from kids, time away from all that she held dear in order to demonstrate that she was going to get that King holiday passed no matter what. And at the same time, do other bills as well, because she always said she never wanted to be noted for only doing the King holiday bill. So she did a drug treatment bill. She did a bill to provide long-term care for seniors. She did a bill to provide for insurance for people that had their money in savings and loan institutions. She did a bill to assure that state money would not go to South Africa because of its apartheid system. And so all the time she was doing the King bill, she was doing these other bills as well. So it's a great honor for me to introduce the First Lady of the Webb household, the former First Lady of Denver, and most of all, the mother of the King holiday in Colorado, the Honorable Wilma J. Webb.
I'm almost tongue-tied. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
It's really quite an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you on this April 4th, 2024, and to be here along with the Honorable Mayor Wellington Edward Webb. You know, sometimes when you've been a part of something pretty much all of your life, sometimes you don't really know where to start, where it really did impact in a way that is remarkable, and in a way you were doing just what you do when you've got the right foundations. You just do things that are good, and you just are involved. And so sometimes it's really difficult to kind of zero in on where do I start or what do I say, how did we do this together, and there are so many different definitions of we. Wellington and I and both of our families, Wellington and I and the community, Wellington and I and our church, Wellington and I and education, Wellington and I and friends and supporters and people who have a good foundation for being defined with what is right and what is good. And so I was kind of the reluctant candidate when I ran for office the first time. It was amazing because both Wellington and I were married in 1971, and I think within 4 months after we were married, Wellington was running for office. And you know, he's always been the type of person, he tells me after he's already done something that he's done it or going to do it. And then I'm, you know, just kind of like, oh really? I'm kind of stunned about it. But anyway, we started off that way, and both of us had been married before, and both of us had 2 children each, and we blended our families, and Wellington and I raised our 4 children. We had custody over them, and they were always a part of our lives. But sometimes you may be involved with good community kinds of things with no goal except doing good. And when I look back at my life, some of the kinds of things that kind of set a pattern or a path for you, they weren't intentionally done to run for office or to try to be a popular person. They were done just because they were good things. Like I particularly remember 1968. That was a real pivotal year for America, for me, for African American people, because so much happened in 1968. And that was when I really started getting more deeply involved in politics. Mrs. Rachel Noel was elected to the Denver School Board, and she was the first African American to be elected. And it was discovered by one of the school teachers that was at Whittier Elementary School when I was at Whittier Elementary School in Denver, that the Denver Public Schools had been segregated in a de facto way. And so Mrs. Noel had a resolution to really desegregate the schools by the tool called busing. And so I was a young parent, and I was involved with a young parents group called Committee on Greater Opportunity. And we went to all of the school board meetings to hear about this resolution. And I became sort of like the spokesperson for the group. Well, the resolution passed, and it desegregated the schools, but I don't believe Mrs. Noel knew, nor anyone else, and this was going on throughout the country, that there would be a great migration of white people out of the city of Denver. And so, as an aftermath, a school district that had had like 90,000 students in it went down to 60,000, lost about 30,000 students. And the real estate market changed. People were buying and selling houses. And so that was really the first experience that I got in terms of being involved with politics that really do have an impact on people. I say that I was the reluctant candidate because at the time I was working between either Mobil Oil Corporation, and then I left Mobil to go to college, back to college full time, so that I could get my degree. And then Wellington and I, with 4 children, we ran out of money. So then I went back to work at United Bank. I don't know if many of you know, but we are called executive assistants now. But back at that time, I was an executive secretary, and I knew shorthand, and I knew all of the business machines and all of that kind of thing. And that's really where I got a firm foundation about how businesses operate and how they work. Well, when I went back to work after going to school for a period of time, I'm reading the newspaper, which I used to do every morning. I'd have the newspaper read by 8:30 in the morning. And so I read in the paper that Wilma Webb is going to seek political office for state representative. Now, I haven't mentioned this to any of the staff, the managers, the higher-ups and all of that. And so I read it in the paper that I'm going to run for office. Now, we had had a discussion about perhaps at some time in the future I might run for office. And so then this article was in the paper, and so I said, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to go in and tell my boss that I might be running for office, which it should have been reversed. I should have told him before it was in the newspaper, before anyone saw it. And so anyway, I was working at United Bank at that time, and United Bank was very pleased. I was pleasantly surprised that I was going to run for office. They were very supportive, and they gave me a leave of absence to run for office. And there was a vacancy where during that time in Denver, the mayor had the power to appoint someone if there was a vacancy on city council or any other city office. And so the rumor was going around that Councilman Elvin Caldwell, who all of you know, no, maybe you don't, you're kind of young, you may not know him. But anyway, he was very powerful. And there was a rumor going around that he was going to step down from the council seat and that he was going to give his blessings to Hiawatha Davis. And so there was a lot of discourse going on in the community because people felt like they should be able to elect their council person and not have one appointed by the mayor. And so Wellington and Elvin and I sat down and had this conversation. And he agreed to carry the ordinance, which would say if there were a vacancy, that there would be a special election. And so then we did have the special election. And then King Trimble, who was the state representative, changed his mind about where he wanted to serve. And so then he decided that he wanted to be the city council person, and then that left the vacancy in the state representative seat. So I ran for the state rep seat. He was already appointed to the council and ran for council. And so that was how I was elected. I had no dream about being an elected official, but I served my constituency, House District 8, for 13 years, 6 terms, And I think because I had no agenda about upward mobility or a career in politics or that kind of thing, I think I did a pretty good job. I carried in the minority party. I never was in the majority party, but I got voters on both sides of the aisle, both Democrats, of which I am, and Republican voters to vote on much of the legislation that I was carrying.
Mrs. Webb, actually, Christian has a question he wanted to ask you about your community service and how you, go ahead.
I would like to ask everybody here, but especially you three, what are some of your earliest memories of serving community, if you could share with us?
Earliest memories of serving the community.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You mean before I was elected, or you mean after I was elected?
Your earliest memory, whatever, like your first, like,
Okay.
yeah, I'm serving community.
One was the Noel resolution on education, and I was there at all of those school board meetings. Another was when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. passed away. There were rumors of perhaps there would be riots on Holly Street and 32nd Avenue, and that I was there that night. It was the first time that I had ever heard Malcolm X speak, because somebody had brought a little phonograph, and I guess it was battery operated or something, and they were playing Malcolm X's speech. So I was there that night, and we were trying to talk people into there's a better way to handle what was rumored to have happened. That was another incident. Another was poor children. I would be taking them to the circus with other parents and other mothers so that they would have an opportunity to do some things that they could not afford to do. And so we were taking families. We were collecting clothes for poor people. Many of you may, and you may not, because I think there was a lot of movement from Denver to Aurora, but many of you may remember there was a King Soopers that was in the Dahlia Shopping Center.
Absolutely.
Do you remember that?
Absolutely.
You were probably very little, and it was there.
He wasn't born yet.
But
With
anyway,
the state rink across. Yeah.
I was there registering people to vote, and I didn't have to do that. And so you speak of 1964 and 1965, 1968. I was working at Mobile Oil Corporation, and of course the word went out about Dr. King being assassinated. And normally our work hour was 7:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the evening. They let everybody go home because they thought that there was a riot. There were only about 5 or 6 of us who were African Americans that were there, and I remember the very day that they went by everybody's desk to tell them to go home. And I remember watching that on television in terms of the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
And Mrs. Webb, that probably had more of a profound effect on you, because one of the things a lot of folks don't know is the first time he ever spoke in Denver at New Hope Baptist Church, she, Mrs. Webb, was a youngster, and she played the piano while Mrs. Williams sung "If I Could Help Somebody, My Living Shall Not Be in Vain," which became Dr. King's favorite song. Tell us about that. And then Mayor Webb wanted to answer that same question.
Okay. When I was growing up, I was a member of New Hope Baptist Church, and Dr. King, I think, visited about 4 different churches in Denver on different occasions. And we had a service called Men's Day. Many of you might be familiar with Men's Day and Women's Day, where when it's Men's Day, the men take over everything in the church, the ushers, the Sunday school teachers, every office that there is, and they take it over. Well, Dr. King was the guest speaker there, and I was about maybe 12 years old when he came to New Hope. And he came several different times. When Mrs. Coretta Scott King came, I was a little older. I was about maybe 14 or 15. And it was her very first speaking engagement
Ever.
anywhere.
That's right.
Was here in Denver at New Hope Baptist Church. And my mother gave me piano lessons and organ lessons. And when I was younger, I was really very much on the road to a musical career. I played those instruments very well. And so I was playing the day that Mrs. King came to Denver for Women's Day, and she was the guest speaker. And so she and I became very close friends. I was at the organ, and looking back, she was the speaker right there, and we were kind of like passing notes and that kind of thing. And so that was her very first speaking engagement. And then the song, "Then My Living Shall Not Be in Vain," maybe most of you are familiar with that. That was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s signature song, and he first heard it here in Denver, Colorado. And and she preferred to be called Anna, not Anna, Mrs. Anna Lee Williams, who was the wife, or the minister's wife, of the Dr. Reverend M.C. Williams. His real name was Murphy Cleophas Williams, and he always went by M.C. But anyway, his wife, Anna Lee Williams, who wanted to perform one day at Carnegie Hall, and she did. But she was the first one who sang, "Then My Living Shall Not Be in Vain," and that was the song that Dr. King adopted as his signature song. Now, when we began celebrating Dr. King's birthday officially in 1986, some years after that, I think it was about 92 or 93, we had Mrs. Williams, who had moved to California, she and Reverend Williams at that time. She came back to Denver, and we had her to perform with the Colorado Symphony Orchestra, because she was the first person to sing that for Dr. King. And we had a very, very close relationship. Mrs. King and I had a very close relationship. Her daughter, Yolanda King, came here, and she was a playwright. And she conducted a play that was going on here, and Mrs. King called me and wanted me to come and be with her at the play. And then also Mrs. King was featured at the Auraria campus, where she spoke there. And she also relied upon me to make a meeting happen between her and Governor Richard D. Lamb, which I did. And that's when we first set up the Martin Luther King Colorado Holiday Commission through Governor Lamb. And Mrs. King was here. And I executed that and made it happen. And during the same time that she was here, we had her to visit the House of Representatives when I was representative, and they would not let her speak before the House of Representatives, but she was able to speak in the Senate. So there's so many stories. Like I said in the beginning, I don't know how to really tell you everything because there's so much. Perhaps if I tell you about the bill, that might move us politically so that you will know what happened then. But Wellington wants to say something.
And Mr. Mayor, here in about a minute, we're going to take a moment of silence, because that will mark literally the 56th anniversary that they, at the time they pronounced Dr. King.
Okay. One, the leak that Wilma read in the newspaper, I always said if we could find out who did it, they ought to kill him. But I got a good idea who did it. Question was things before being elected?
Your earliest memory of
Earliest?
serving community.
Earliest was, two things stand out to me. One is I've always had a passion for seniors, and I always thought they got the short stick when it comes to all the new taxes, all the new fees, all the raises that come with having to pay their public service bill. And I always thought the PUC didn't see any of them. So I organized getting seniors on the church buses and took them to the Public Utilities Commission meeting and had them each testify to the Public Utilities Commission about why they should not be raising rates for their public service bills to a point that they can't afford to.
All right, Mr.
to
Mayor,
participate.
if we
want
may,
to stop.
if we can stop and stand in reverence, just for a moment, a moment of silence. It was at this time that they announced Dr. King had succumbed to his injuries. Thank you.
The second activity was that I was very close to Lauren Watson in the Black Panthers. And there had been a couple of shootings that took place in Curtis Park. And it was our belief that, one, that the police department was not officially carrying out their responsibilities as they should. So Lauren and a few of us decided to take over the mayor's office. And we went down to the mayor's office, and McNichols decided to not be present. So the first time I sat in the mayor's chair was probably 10 years before I ever went into politics. As a youngster with a lot of hair and a black leather jacket, and a black turtleneck, and that was my beginning of getting involved, primarily within the community on things that I saw were not appropriate and not right, because I thought that everybody could make a difference. The last piece for historical context, when Coretta Scott King came to Denver to speak, they would not print her name on the program. Wow. The name on the program said Mrs. Martin Luther King Jr. It never said Coretta Scott King, which was common during that day. This was, some of you looking kind of profound. Yeah, that was in all the black churches. Wow. Because they felt that they wanted to make sure they gave deference to the male. And so Coretta Scott King didn't get to use her name till 1 or 2 years later, because everywhere she went to speak, they always referred to her as Mrs. Martin Luther King. Wow. And to show you also the difference between Wilma's journey and my journey before we connected on this pathway, Wilma was at New Hope playing the organ for Mrs. King. My grandmother was chair of the Women's Day at New Hope. So the obvious question you're asking, was I there? That's the obvious question. The answer is no. We played pickup ball games every Sunday. We were playing basketball. Winner stay on, loser go home. We stayed on a long time. And half the games we played were at Loyola. We would take the cars and circle them in the parking lot until the priests 3 months later took the rims down. And then we went from there back down to Red Shield to play, because we'd play on Sundays, because that was one day everybody was off. And so while Wilma was playing the organ for Coretta Scott King, I was trying to stay on the basketball court at either Loyola or Red Shield.
Thank you for the answer. I'm curious to hear your earliest memories in serving community.
It was actually, my grandparents were very instrumental and very involved in the political scene. And they honestly taught us at a young age how important it was not only to register, but to vote. And when I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandmother, she was 65 years old when she got me. And at this time, I was 11 or 12 years old, and we were going from door to door campaigning and for the state legislature and things of that nature, and registering people to vote, to get people out to vote. It's about 11 11, 12 years old. I'll never forget that. And it was that important to us. And we used to sit around and we not only would watch the news, however, we would read the paper, and she would have us take turns reading the paper. And after the elections, how the paper would always print who the winners were, and then it had in the columns how many votes were cast for this candidate or that candidate, and that was my earliest memory.
Thank you. I would like to actually ask you two, too, if I can get the microphone.
I'll tell you what, we're going to ask them in a little bit because Mayor Webb made it clear he likes basketball. He has to leave at 7:30, and I want Mrs. Webb.
Is there a game?
There is a game.
Okay, so then.
And I want Mrs. Webb to tell us about the bill and the fight that she took to get there, and then we're going to continue this, if that's okay with you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do that, but before I do that, when I first went into the House of Representatives,
Yes, ma'am.
we had a very active Black Caucus. And the Black Caucus then consisted of elected officials and also people who were active in the community. And somehow, I guess, because I was a freshman and because I really didn't know how not to do what they wanted me to do, they wanted me to be the chairman. And so I became chairman of the Black Caucus during my freshman year. And that same year, I know during Wellington's service in the Colorado House, also there was a Kogachoke hold death that occurred.
Carl Newland.
And then when I was serving, there was another Kogachoke hold while I was a freshman in the legislature. And so I took that case all the way to the Supreme Court, because Ernest Myers was a young student at Manual High School. He was a wrestler. You know how you have football players and basketball players? He was a wrestler. And these off-duty policemen went to his home. He had a marijuana cigarette in an ashtray. And the policemen wanted to take him and arrest him, and they weren't even on duty. They wrestled all the way out to the front yard. This was up on Josephine Street in Denver. And that was my constituent. And so they killed him with the Kogachoke hold. And so then I had to do something because I was chairperson of the Black Caucus, and this was not the first time that this kind of incident had happened. And so along with the help of some attorneys and along with Wellington and with constituents, I took the case on, and we took it all the way to the Supreme Court in terms of it was an unlawful death that had occurred. And so you can imagine I'm a freshman legislator, and this is in front of me, but I did it anyway. And so that same year, you know, the legislature starts in January. And guess whose birthday is in January? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And so it was like maybe the second week that we were holding sessions, and there had been resolutions that had been adopted sometime before in previous legislatures, but nobody had been able to pass a bill. And so nobody really believed that there was going to be the possibility of a Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And so I carried the bill, and this was the same time that Umoja came down to the state capitol. And I was preparing for the hearing, which was in the State Affairs Committee, and I was in my office and I heard these voices, and they were saying, holiday, holiday, Martin Luther King, holiday. And they were marching on the sidewalks of the street. They were not in the street. And so they got to the Capitol, and it must have been about 300 people coming down. And really, to tell the truth, I think you all wanted to storm the Capitol.
We did.
I think you wanted to storm the Capitol. And so
It wouldn't have turned out as well for us as it did during January the 6th, though.
I don't think you were there to destroy. I said to storm the Capitol. But anyway, I invited all of you to come into the hearing, which was at 1:30. It was at 1:30. And all the legislators were coming back from lunch, and all of the hearing meetings were going on in the state capitol basement. And so anyway, we had the hearing. We had to move it from the regular meeting room to the old Supreme Court chambers. And everybody in that hearing spoke to support the holiday. Well, the chairman, and he's a good friend of mine now, the chairman took the bill off the table and said, we're going to postpone this to another hearing. Well, he did postpone it. He postponed it for about 3 weeks or so. And then when all of you came back, because nobody expected that you would come back to the Capitol a second time for that hearing, Umoja returned. But that was the first bill that I carried for Dr. King's holiday. And in that bill, it was only carried by minority. When I say minority this time, I mean Black and Hispanic supporters, and they were all Democrats. So the bill got voted upon, and it failed.
And Mrs. Webb, if
failed.
you remember, though, we came back because you told us, you
Yes,
united
I
us,
invited you.
and you went to, you had the East Denver Ministerial Alliance announce from the church, from the pulpits in the church, that you were going to be having this meeting again. And that's when we, Johnny, you were over at Central Baptist, I believe. I was at Union Baptist. And that's when we came back, yeah.
Well, that time, the bill failed on a strict party line vote. The Republican majority killed the bill. And after maybe 20 or 30 years after that, the ironic thing is that the King family never did tell anybody of their political affiliations. Come to find out that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Republican. Mm-hmm. And here I was, a Democrat, pushing for this holiday for him, and here the Republicans were killing this bill. And that was the first time. The second time that I carried it, and I'm going to rush through this because this could be encyclopedias full of information and full of different events that happened that have not really been really expressed as publicly over the years as perhaps they could have been. The second year, I had canvassed and I had lobbied all of the members on the committee, and I had the votes to get it out of the committee. And you may reflect and remember there was a picture of Sister Loretta Ann Madden. She was a nun, and she was there every day supporting legislation for poor people, for the mentally ill, for education. She was a good woman.
She had a habit on.
She did, and eventually there was some resentment to her that got her to register as a lobbyist because she was trying to promote concerns about the poor and about different issues that were going on. Well, anyway, they took the vote in the committee for the bill. This was the second bill. This was the second year. And remember, you have to abide by the rules. And you can't present a bill, at least when I was there, that is the same bill. It has to be a different bill on that topic. And so it had to be a different bill. And that time I had gotten rid of a lot of the arguments that were opposed to the bill, like we have too many holidays already. And so that's when I combined Lincoln and Washington Day down to one. We had a holiday for I love them dearly, but they weren't at the same caliber of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of Bronco Day. We had a holiday for Bronco Day, and so eliminated that one. And then someone who did not want the bill to pass took away, this was an ill attempt, took away Election Day. They put that on the bill so that people would not like the bill. And it narrowed it down. Do you remember when you used to get the day off to go vote? Mm-hmm. It was narrowed down to 2 hours for citizens to go vote. And so that happened. But what happened was the committee was 12 members, the State Affairs Committee, same committee again. And this time I had 7 to 5 votes. So that would have gotten it out of committee to the House floor. And the person who had given me his word that he was going to vote for the bill did not keep his word. And so the bill died on a tie vote of 6-6. And when a bill ties, then it loses. And so because as an elected official, when you give your word is your bond. And so that was really shocking to me. And this was the second year. And so then after it was over with, and I confronted this state representative and asked him why he did that. Because nobody does that. Nobody. If you have a different feeling about a bill, you're supposed to go to the sponsor and tell them, I cannot support this bill because maybe something came up in the bill, an amendment or something that made it different. Or maybe their religion says I can't vote. But they're supposed to come and tell you. He didn't come tell me anything. He just got in the committee and did not vote like he had told me he was going to vote. And so anyway, it failed. And so I was coming out of the committee because I knew that that wasn't what was supposed to happen. It's the first and only time out of 13 years of service in the House of Representatives that I cried a tear. And the photographers took the picture of this tear coming out of my eye, and I was walking out of the hearing room with Sister Loretta Ann Madden. So that was the second time as to what happened. The third time, and remember, at that time when I was serving, I was always in the minority party, never majority party. But in addition to that, every other year at the legislature, there was the governor's call. And only bills that the governor would ask the legislature to carry that were concerning the state that needed to be carried could be considered. And so you're having this battle. You only were allowed at that time, but now you can carry as many bills as you want to. But we were only allowed about 6 bills per senator and per state representative. And so I'm making this decision myself. Should I waste another bill, or is that a waste, or is it not going to pass, or whatever? So that year, I got both sponsors of the bill, Republicans and Democrats, and I integrated it so it wouldn't be just a minority bill going through the process. And so got it in committee, and that year I also had Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a witness posthumously. And I brought in the record player, and I had all of these other people to testify, and there were people that testified against the bill as well. But this time, when I played that speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the speech was not the I Have a Dream speech. It was, America is essentially a dream. And when those legislators listened to that speech of Dr. King's, they voted the bill out of committee, and it was the first time that it had been to the floor since Wellington had been there. And so this time it got voted out of the House of Representatives on the House floor over to the Senate. The next part is very sad, and I didn't tell this story over the years because I wanted everybody to be unified behind this great American who really deserved the holiday. And I didn't want to do things that were divisive or divisive. And so the bill gets to the Senate, and the House had sent it over, and the senator who was supposed to be the prime sponsor did not show up for the committee hearing. Did not show up. So there was nobody in the Senate to carry that bill. It just so happened that I went over to see how the bill was doing, and I was there, but I was not a senator. I was a state representative. And so the chairman of that committee in the Senate asked me, Representative Webb, will you please come and speak for this bill? And I spoke for the bill in the Senate, even though I was not a senator. And so, of course, the bill failed because the Republicans were opposed to it, and they were the majority party. So then, after it was over with, I'm wondering where the Senate sponsor is. And then I went down, I don't know if you've been in the state capitol, but they have a cafeteria type situation, and tell me if I'm out of time. I can't tell this story in a minute.
No,
I
go
can't
ahead.
tell it in a
Please,
minute.
tell the story.
And so anyway, I was downstairs in the cafeteria, and this other senator came up to me and said, she called me Wilma. She said, you know, you can blast that bill out of the committee in the Senate because we have different rules than they have in the House. And so I found the senator who was the prime sponsor, and I told that senator that he could blast the bill out and it could get a hearing in the full Senate. Well, the bill got blasted out, but that senator went up to the microphone and told the other senators, I'm not going to embarrass you by having you to vote for this bill. Did you hear that?
You hear that?
Okay. So that year, the bill failed on the Senate floor, and it should not have. It should have passed that year. That was the third year. The fourth year, I can't tell you in such a short period of time all of the political stratagem that was going on concerning the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr. and the holiday. And this fourth time, I was carrying the bill, and each time has had to be a different bill, and I managed to rewrite the bill so that it was in good order and good form. And I have to tell you that I wrote the bills, not the staff. I wrote my own bills. And so I sent the bill in, and it went through and was introduced. It has to go over the counter in the House. But the thing about it was that it was assigned to go through 4 committees before getting to the House floor. And so the Speaker of the House was opposed to the bill. And when I was a freshman, he had told me, this time I'm not a freshman, I'm there like 8 years, but he had told me that he felt like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a communist. And I said, that's not true. So I went and got Dr. King's book when I was a freshman, Why I Cannot and Never Was and Never Will Be a Communist. He had a book on it. And I took it to the Speaker of the House and gave it to him. And so he knew that Dr. King was not a communist. But anyway, this bill, I don't know who was the force behind him being so strongly opposed to it. But anyway, what happened was the bill was assigned to 4 different committees, and that's unusual. And so then many of the committees were imbalanced with people that were opposed to the bill and people who were Republican and very, very conservative Republicans. And so one such committee, I think it was the next to the last one, because the final one was appropriations, and the bill did not have any appropriated money from the state to get this holiday moving. We raised all of the money for the first year and every year since then for the adoption of the King holiday. But then what happened was, thanks again to my parents, to my husband, to my church, that I knew all of these people in Colorado Springs. So I got on the phone, and that committee was loaded with elected officials from Colorado Springs. And I called, and many of you may or may not know his name, Dr. Milton Proby. Dr. Milton Proby? I don't know, you're all so much younger than we are, but yes, Terry knows him. But anyway, he got on the phone and he called. He was a very prominent person in Colorado Springs, and he was respected by all people, by black people, by white people, by wealthy people, by poor people. He was loved in Colorado Springs. He got on the phone and he called, I don't know how many churches, how many business affiliations or whatever. He brought 3 busloads of people to the state capitol to go into that committee hearing to speak in behalf of King and to watch their own representative on how they were voting. And so the bill got out of those 4 committees, now it's to the floor. But then, not to be outdone, the speaker has one of his persons that want to be speakers when he leaves that position to carry an amendment which said, well, if Dr. King was such a great person, then the people ought to vote on this. He did not do the responsibility of an elected official. We were supposed to have that before the House and the Senate. And so that amendment was placed on it and it was sent to the Senate. So I myself went over to the Senate and I talked with and lobbied every senator in there. In Colorado, the House of Representatives has 65 members, and in the Senate, there are 35 members to the Senate. And so anyway, I lobbied them all, and Wellington came over and spoke with the president of the Senate, who was Tom Strickland at the time. Was it Ted or Tom?
Ted.
Ted, there's a
Ted
Tom, there's
Strickland.
Ted. Ted Strickland at the time. And
We had a very forceful conversation.
you want to talk about it?
No, I don't want to talk about it.
And so, anyway, the bill went to the Senate floor, and we got that horrible amendment off. But in the meantime, I'm thinking about what kind of race war it would have been if that decision had been made up to the citizens. It would have been awful. And so I was thinking myself, do I have to kill this bill myself? That was what was going through my mind. And they got the amendment off, and then if the bill that you send over from one house to the other is different, then it has to go back to the other house for them to approve the changes or to reject the changes. And so anyway, that weekend, it was in April, and there was Good Friday, and one of the rules of the House was that we never let anybody off during holidays while the session is going on. Well, the speaker adjourned. He adjourned and did not have a session on that Friday. They were on the phone trying to get all of the elected officials whom I had gotten their word and had lobbied them and had gone to each of them one by one to make sure that they were going to vote for that bill. So they were on the telephone all that weekend long lobbying to have members of the House to change their vote if they had already said that they were going to vote aye. Now, a few of them did, but not all of them. And so to this day, I really respect all of those legislators who held their ground and said, no, this should be. America needs Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King is a great man, and if anybody should be having a holiday, it should be him. And so anyway, the bill came back to the House for consideration of the Senate amendments. And I was on the phone myself with one elected official. He was the one who had been at the State House for over 30 years. I think it was like 33 years he'd been there. And I asked him, I said, this bill is going to come back and I know they're going to kill it. I said, you've been here a long time. I said, tell me what I need to do. And he told me, he says, well, you know, you're the prime sponsor. And when you go to the microphone, you have to make the motions of what to do, whether to support the bill or whether you oppose the bill or the amended bill or the amendments or whatever. But you have to do it, and you have to stay there. You can't go away and go sit down and let somebody else go up, which at that time would have been the majority leader because they were opposed. So then it was that morning, it was Monday morning, and I'm coming into the House chambers, and I usually would get there about 8:30 and we would start at 9. And so this majority leader came up to me, and I think and I believe because people always treated me like they liked me, and he said, Wilma, I'm going to have to make a motion. And he was telling me that he was going to oppose the bill. That's what I said, well, you do what you have to do. And I said, well, I'm going to do what I have to do. And so the bill got called up, House Bill 1201, for reconsideration. And so I went up to the microphone and I started moving motions, which well, they're motions like I urge an aye vote on the amendments that were considered by the Senate, or else I urge a no vote, or whatever, whichever position that I had taken. And I did that. And then while I was doing the motions on the bill, then the majority leader was furious. And then he went up to the speaker's podium and they started talking. And I don't know what made me do it, what God, they're in the presence or whatever, but I went up there also to see what he was telling him, what he was saying. And so then the speaker says to me, Representative Webb, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just moving the motions myself. That was the truth, that's what I was doing. And so there was nothing that he could do about it because it was within the rules. And so I went back to the microphone, I moved all the necessary rules, then the final vote was for the adoption of House Bill 1201. And you know that we were voting by electrical machines, and then the green lights started coming on, and then some of the red lights, and there were enough red lights for me to be concerned, but the green lights came on, those are all aye votes, and they kept coming on. And so then the clerk announced the number of votes, and they were well over the necessary a majority, well over. I mean, I think it was 57 votes, and I don't want to say because I don't want you quoting me if I have the wrong number. But anyway, it passed, and you could have heard a pin drop. And then the press started coming up to me and wanting to talk to me and that kind of thing. First time ever that a legislator had been asked to leave the House chambers and go out in the lobby. And that was sort of like expressing displeasure that the bill passed. And then that was in 1984. We were supposed to first celebrate officially in 1986. But in 1985, when it came time, it was a new election, new members of the House and whatever. I was on the highest committee that there is in the legislature, and I'm going to stop after this. I think my husband's giving me this. You're going on and on. But anyway, I was on the Joint Budget Committee. That's the only committee that is a committee that has both senators and House members on it. And he wouldn't make the appointment. He wouldn't make the appointment, even though my party had elected me and had appointed me. And he was just supposed to sign the paper. He wouldn't do it. So then I had to fight to get my seat back on the Joint Budget Committee, and I had to go to court to do that. But I won't go into all of that. But we won, we won, we won.
Vern, this is more for you and Christian. Wilma's told you about the passage of the holiday. The record you're making now has given you a lot of insights that we've normally not talked about. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the issues, I always wondered why so many of these things came up after I became mayor that didn't come up before. King's birthday's in January. We celebrate King's birthday. We have a march, a parade coming down Colfax. And what we learned is you got to make sure two things. One, who you have in the front to make sure they go in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We just assume they're going to go in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Second point is that initially, the Klan was able to have the steps of the Capitol because the process was whoever went to the state Capitol first to file their papers to get the steps of the holiday, get the steps of the state Capitol for the purpose of having a rally or demonstration was done on a first come, first served basis. It had nothing to do with the merit of it. And the Klan was the first one there because we were not aware of that
2
policy.
years in a row.
So now we have a dilemma because we're going to march, and we also have the Klan is going to hold the high ground of holding the steps at the Capitol. So we had to make sure that, one, that the next permit would not be granted to the Klan. And for Carlos Guerra, Leroy Lemos, Alberta Simmons, and Julia Gales, Julia made chili. They had a hut. They had a mobile home
Yeah.
out in front of the Revenue Department where they were giving out the permits. They stayed there and stayed in front of the building at the entrance for like 32 days to make sure that for the following year,
Wow.
24 hours a day, that the next permit would be granted to the King Holiday Group and not to the Klan or anyone else. But we have to now deal with what's there. We've got to deal with the Klan. Most of them came from Texas,
And skinheads.
and skinheads, and others.
Yeah.
And now it's become a public event. Now, if you go back and look at the film, you will see that the parade is going down Colfax, and it is supposed to go into Civic Center. But if some of you were there, you would notice that the march split. Half went to the Civic Center, the other half went to the state capitol. And who was at the state capitol? Folks that were not participating in any of the King activities.
And they didn't have a permit.
They didn't have a permit. They were there to share their displeasure with the Klan being up on the grounds of the state capitol. And so I met with black students, Omar, many of them from CU Boulder. And they were telling me they were fulfilled by their philosophic views that they ought to go out and make their protests. And I'm saying to them, well, Dr. King has already made that statement. He supported the Klan speaking in Skokie, Illinois, as did the Anti-Defamation League,
As we did.
saying that you cannot deprive someone of speaking.
First Amendment.
And I said, why do you want to go over there to hear him call you a nigger anyway? I mean, what are you going to get out of that? There's no conclusion. There's no there. But they wanted to do it anyway and thought we were being soft. Then for some of the gang members that had ill-filtrated, the marchers down by the fence facing the Klan, then halfway through, then they start throwing the rocks at the Klan. The other folks, Vern, that as you remember, that were at the Civic Center,
Yes, sir.
there was nothing going on at the Civic Center because now all hell is about to break loose at the state capitol. And who's in charge of the highway patrol? The
The
governor.
governor.
They only got about 10 highway patrolmen at the state capitol. Who's in control of the police department?
The mayor.
The mayor. So what does that mean? That means I've got to send all these squad cars and police officers up to the state capitol to assist the Klan and the highway patrolmen to get out of there before they get killed, because now the Klan has decided to stop calling people names, because now they're looking for somebody to help them get the hell out the building before they get killed. Because the fence now is starting to fall, and now they are running in the state capitol and running to the basement looking for help, which eventually happened, and all the Klan was then put into
Presidential tunnel.
sheriff's deputies that transport prisoners to get them out of the state capitol grounds. So they actually were saved by the different police department. But then other folks wouldn't leave, and some of you now old enough to remember, then all of a sudden, now we've got tear gas being shot because we had some inexperienced officers on the front. All of this could have been avoided if the march had gone where it was supposed to. So what's the moral of the story? Don't have no weak people in the front of the line. Don't have any weak people at the front of the line because they're too easily tantalized by somebody telling them to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
And they're going over there because they think they're doing the right thing, when in fact, that is exactly the wrong thing to do.
That's right.
But it was hairy because we were not sure and wanted to make sure that no one got hurt really bad, and although one girl did, because we didn't want that happening on King's holiday.
That's right.
Which is what the Klan wanted. They wanted a spectacle. They wanted a demonstration. They wanted tear gas. And some of our younger African-American students played right into it. They gave the Klan what they wanted. And that's why it's so important that we've got to follow the marshals, we've got to follow the people that are organizing the marches, that have thought a lot of this stuff through. There were community justice people in with some of the marchers and in with the Klan, giving us information, but you have to have the split-second decision-making to make sure that you can maintain control of the perimeter and make sure that you can maintain control of where the march is and how you're going to exit to get out.
Mr. Mayor, I remember actually the next year, if you recall, based on what you just said, I remember Johnny was with us, that we were marching down. I was up front with you, and you got word, DPD told you, that the Klan was at the Capitol, and you diverted the parade that very second we went to the Colorado Convention Center.
That's right.
Yep.
I remember it as if it was just, remember that, Johnny? And Roger Tinsley, remember Roger Tinsley?
Yeah, I remember Roger.
He started gathering people. He said, come on, they're going to feed you lunch. They're going to feed you lunch. Just make sure everybody comes this way.
Yeah.
And I remember that vividly. We there was an RV center on East Colfax between between Chambers and Peoria, and it was on the south side of the street. And I went over there and I negotiated with them and asked them if they would be willing to be a sponsor with us and give us the motor home. And they gave us the motor home for years, and Alberta Simmons led that effort, and then we all took different turns. We all worked in 4-hour shifts,
Right.
to make sure that we were there to get the holiday. And that first year during the riot, Mr. Mayor, I'll never forget, Vanita Vincent was your chief of staff, and you sent her and I down to the emergency command center. I don't know why you sent me, but you sent, I don't know why.
You were probably visible in front.
But I'll never forget that, because at that time I was still working with you at the mayor's office downtown. I was still downtown before I went over to Parks. Yeah.
But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that not only is getting the holiday bill of all the hell that Wilma went through, and she went through a lot of it, important to memorialize and remember. It is equally important of how the holiday is carried out for future generations, and also to check with the person who actually came up with the 7 days of activity, which was Wilma,
Absolutely.
so that it doesn't lose the framework of what she envisioned. Because if you go to other cities and other states, they may have 1 day, they may have 2 days, but they don't have 5 or 6 days of activity. Only Colorado does that, and you need to be proud of that.
Amen.
This is your time to remember what you've done, because you are the torchbearers for the next generation and the generation after that. Because for some of us, as we've gotten older, we're proud of the fact that you're keeping it going. And we want you to keep it going. And not only keeping the King Holiday Bill emphasis going to protect the legacy of our people. And I'm being racially chauvinistic for a second. It is important to keep the history of our people, because you have to write your own history. If someone else writes it, it's not going to be the same.
Yeah.
Amen.
And oftentimes we had to remind Vern, sometimes people are giving him information that's not completely accurate. It's kind of like the guy that played football, Omar, Christian in high school, you know, they did 2 yards of carry. Then about 10 years later, they were up to 7 yards of carry. By the time they 60 years old, they were all American. Because the story expands the older they get. And I'm saying what we need to do is make sure that the history is cold facts of what actually transpired. Somebody said the other day, and I'm going to give the mic back to Wilma as I slip over to the table, that somebody carried the legislation from one chamber to another.
That was me.
No.
That was me.
Yeah, no, somebody told you that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't true.
No.
Yeah.
Clerks do that.
Once 1201, once he hit that gavel in the House of Representatives, Wilma won that battle. There wasn't no need to carry nothing. It was over. The war was done. The war was done.
I just wanted to add something that you need to know, and that is 2 issues. One, Colorado, after the first celebration, which was the inaugural celebration, Atlanta had a debriefing of all of the different holidays from all the states and all the cities and whatever in Atlanta at the King Center there. And our celebration here was the best in the country. And a lot of what is being modeled afterwards came from here. And we wanted that holiday to reflect Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. A lot of people had a different idea for it, but insisted that it reflect who Dr. King was. And we won on that, and we were right on that. The other thing was, I had mentioned that when the bill passed, you know, a lot of bills passed, and some of them have $1 million appropriations expended, and they have to have an approval from the Appropriations Office and Office of State Planning and Budgeting and all that. With everything that was done to that bill that I did, there was no cost to the state. And so then it was argued that, well, a day off, people are being paid. Well, they're going to be paid that anyway. They were salaried. We did not have anything like mass production or whatever, anything like that. And so then I won that argument too. But the point that I'm trying to make is we raised from people giving at least or the amount of $1 to, I think it was U.S. West or Quest gave $10,000. We raised close to $100,000 on that first holiday with nothing to begin with.
Wow.
And then when I wanted to send some money to Atlanta, to the King Center, for the continuation of the King Center and to help with the whole thrust of the holiday, some people that were on our team didn't want me to send them money to Atlanta. I said, how could you even put yourself to say that? You know, we all have to help one another. And so we ended up, I think we sent them about $5,000 from Colorado.
It was Mountain
So-
Bell.
I need to say one
It
quick
was
thing.
Mountain Bell.
Yes.
The biggest one was Quest.
Yeah,
That was
10,000, yeah.
This is for all of you out there that are going to watch this at a later date. Talk to your elders.
Please.
Talk to Terry.
Yeah.
Talk to Wilma. If you can find me, you can catch me and I'll talk to you. Talk to the elders, because so much of what you read,
Needs to be verified.
well, it needs to be verified, but
Yeah.
we live this.
Yeah,
We're not talking about what we read in a book.
yeah.
When you're talking about Tucson, or you talking about Stokely, or you talking about Jesse, or you talking about Johnny Cochran, these are all people that have been to our house, and we were in the kitchen drinking wine, debating the issues of the day.
Wow.
These are not people that we read about. These are people that we fought alongside of in the struggle. And were there times we were scared? Yeah, in Mississippi and in Georgia, marching when the police meant
Yeah,
you're going to end up in some small county jail.
yeah.
And everybody talking about how they ain't afraid of
It was
nobody.
a real Klan and a real demonstration, right
So-
down the marchers.
So I'm just saying, talk to your elders while you can and while they're here, because they can also share with you some of what you might not remember. And Vern said something today that was helpful for me in terms of the mobile home, because I knew when we had people out there for all night long and all day long to make sure we were first in line, those people never got the credit that they're due. The same way, Christian, you got people that help. They're never going to get the Christian that they're never going to get the publicity that they do, but they also know it's like a team. You got to have pastors, you got to have people playing all different positions. The team wins. And when I think about our struggle, I think about the team winning and not us winning individually.
I just have one closing comment to make. Remember, I mentioned about the Speaker of the House and his opposition to the King holiday and the battles that I personally went through in terms of penalties for carrying that bill. Well, the Speaker passed away. This was after I left the legislature. He had his family, and he wanted me to memorialize him. So people can change. People can realize that maybe their position was wrong. And there was even a newspaper article in, I think it was Rocky Mountain News when we had one, or Denver Post, where he said, and I'm sure that he was older and gone and sort of reflected on what had happened. He said that he supported the King holiday bill, which I never opposed what he said, because maybe in his own way he came to that conclusion. But he was the power behind the opposition. But he asked for me to memorialize him. And I went down to the state capitol on the day that they had the memory resolution and the tribute and all that to him, and I spoke in his behalf, because all people, even if they're the worst people in the world, have good traits. And so I tried to think of everything I knew about him that was good, and I carried through what his wishes and desires were. He wanted me to memorialize him, and I did.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
You know we're doing this again. You know we're going to do this again.
It's not the full story.
Exactly. I just whispered to Mrs. Webb, you know we're going to do this again. I said to her a week ago, I said, it's time for you to write your book. She says, I'll get around to it. And I said to her, I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a digital recorder. What I'd like you to do is just speak into it, and we'll have a ghostwriter do it. She says, oh, no, I'll be writing my own story.
Just like her bills.
Yep.
Just like her bills.
Absolutely.
Yep. I lived it, as Wellington said, so I know it.
Yeah.
Shantasia, if you will.
Well, my husband, was he leaving me again?
On behalf of the State Conference, NAACP, and the Executive Committee for the Dr. King Holiday Commission, we thank you for your wisdom, we thank you for your love, and we thank you for continuing to get this holiday passed. And we know it was not an easy thing, but we're so glad you're still here to tell the story.
Thank you,
love you.
thank you, love you too. Thank you so very much. Now look what you all are doing. You've been there all the time. Thank you.
Folks, we're going to take a couple more minutes for a recess, and then we're going to ask Johnny, Christian, Sharita, Dr. Nelson, and I, we're going to have just a short conference about some of the things that's going on. So just a short recess real quick as we escort the Honorable Webbs out. Thank you. And you'll do your point as soon as we come back.
I wanted to do it for them.
My apologies. Mayor Webb, Christian actually has a poem that he has written that he would like to give to you and Mrs. Webb at this time.
Am I good here? Or?
You're good, either way.
Hello. I don't need that.
Don't go too far.
So I wrote this poem. I was asked to perform it. I think it was 2018 Marade. And so, it's nice to be able to serve people and use your passion and your gifts to express ideas. So this poem is called I Sing Songs. I sing songs of freedom. I sing songs of the hurts, for the liberation is worth singing. I sing songs of psalms with deep meaning. I sing songs alongside the screams of genocide. These are the troubling scenes of the the mistreatment of melanin beings. I sing songs the way brains of dreaming. Static is status. Revolution is needed. I sing songs to understand my own reasoning. I sing songs to take a stance. I sing songs for equality. I sing songs for every black man. I sing songs instead of grieving. I sing songs for a confused land. I sing songs so everyone can know. I sing songs to highlight the highs that collide into burrows of lows. I sing songs to take back control. I sing songs for my brother's soul. I sing songs down these troubled roads. I sing songs for ideas of hope. I sing songs so you can know. I sing songs a cappella, no need for notes. I sing songs of old ways that were never atoned. I sing songs because most don't know. I sing songs so we can grow. Can I sing this song to you? But I cannot sing in plain view, for I'm a caged bird, and this is what caged birds do. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for all your information. Thank you.
Don't go nowhere. Let's rearrange the set.
Okay.
No, the other camera's in the truck. Hey, Rock.
How do you want to
Let's-
arrange it?
So the 5 of us are sitting here together. Let's just take the table from in between us. Just slide it up. All right.
Well, I put it there because there's like this unsightly metal piece.
Oh, all right. Then let's put the chairs in front of it. Don't turn that off yet. All right, good. Mhm. No, you don't.
I don't think so. Are you? How are we going to fix that?
Yeah. I'm still recording. Okay. And we're still live. Yes. Okay.
Do you write it? Do you read it? Do you listen to it? Oh, okay. Wait, it's a poem that you wrote and learned in school?
Go ask your mom to come.
Oh, my bad.
I can't stand y'all. He said, yep, it's there.
Well, you got a good label.
Yeah. I was telling Miss Terry, one of my cousins, we all in group chats, they sent me this a little while ago talking about, you can always tell a HUD in our forehead.
Oh, no. Where'd my chicken go?
You're hot.
Oh, am I? I didn't say anything bad.
No, but I just.
Not yet.
Sure. Sure.
Testing, 1, 2, testing, 1, 2.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we just had a very wonderful educational experience with both the Honorables Wilma J and Wellington E. Webb. And the history, the power of that history is just dynamite. You know, I mean, reminds me of that show Good Times, that, you know, where that youngster used to say dynamite, and that's what it was. And this is something that we've been, Sharita and Christian has been asking us to do this for a good number of years, to have the Webbs and get the history of the Webbs and what it took to do the holiday. And Christian and Sharita, or Sharita and Christian actually in this case have been with me a very long time, and that is what they have just been talking about getting us on camera. And so I'm going to pass the mic and I'm going to ask, I'm going to start with Sharita, who happens to be the president or the general manager of the statewide special events chair for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Colorado Holiday Commission. Incidentally, for those of you who are tuning in, I'm Dr. Vern L. Howard. That's Vern, middle initial L, last name Howard. And I have the pleasure of serving as the commission chair. And to my left is Sharita Hudnall, who actually is the do-all. And the do-all she don't do, the lady to my right, who's our executive administrative assistant, she does it all. So I want to first give them a hand because the food, the facility, and everything that Shantasia Miller was able to provide for us is just outstanding. However, Sharita, this is something you've been asking for years. So what did you think of it?
So thank you all.
did march in the street. It's just when we got to Sherman, to the State House, we started taking the sidewalk. And so when she looked out the window and saw us coming, we were on the sidewalk. But we had closed down the city. That was our intention. And so, and I mean, when she saw us come, she was like, wow, okay, the community is here. And when we talk about community, we want to talk about Omar Montgomery. I met this young man when he was doing a rite of passage program right here at this facility, as a matter of fact. And he is now the president of the Aurora branch of NAACP. He is also on the executive committee for Cherry Creek Schools. And he is just one of those community people who, once he came to town, he jumped right in, feet first. And he noticed how I was wearing my hair, and he figured he'd do the same. Omar, what did you think of what we had at the West?
Well, first I'm glad that I was sitting up here, and so I wouldn't be distracted by anything. And to be able to listen and to be a part of that history as a listener. The Webbs, the Honorables, laid out the history
shadows that they've casted. And it concerns me because I want to make sure to pass on that rich culture and history that comes with what we do. But and I would say the younger people in here, younger than y'all. Well, because it's all relative, age is relative, right? And so I think about like we can still call you. We still have the ability to like we don't know what to do, and we can pick up that phone. I think about what happens when we can't pick up that phone. Like what are we doing now to prepare for when we can't just pick up the phone and call you? You know, y'all come from larger coffers than we do. Like life is a lot. I don't want to say it's more struggle, but we don't like you put in a lot of money to make this go, right? Like, you know, do we have that same resources? I'm not sure. We would have to talk to each other and figure it out. But I think about when they talk, I just don't think about the history. I think about what happens next. You've embraced me as a futurist, right? Like I came in here with little anchor to history around Dr. King Jr., unless it was the speeches, especially to the Colorado Holiday Commission. And as the people who are transitioning out of that, like there is a huge responsibility, and I do not take that lightly. And I want to make sure that as we're talking to elders are also talking to us to make sure that we're equipped and prepared for what happens next, right? Because it is a huge responsibility. And guess what? After y'all are gone, we are going to be in an era of people who might be running this
channels that tell us things are this way and we know better. We have a responsibility to not deal with those people. We have a responsibility to tell our children, and I say it all the time, and the youngsters, and our young adults, just because things are tough. And if it's worth it, it's gonna be tough. But stand up and continue to work in that direction that you want to do. You don't have to take everybody else's opinion of things. You need to know who you are, that you're an individual and you're enough. You're good enough because you built the whole community. And people copy so much of our culture. How many people are looking at our fashions? How many people copy our music? How many people love to eat our food? They want to know how to cook it. How many people, you can go on and on in our lifetime and know that we are pretty sharp people. We have done some fantastic things. Other people have taken them. They've taken advantage of them, but it has not stopped us from being creative and create things and set examples that it will give people the idea, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I need to look at it again. But I always feel like, don't let anything like this shut you down. Know that the youngsters are looking at us for an example, and we have the responsibility to provide them with an example. This is why all of these young, handsome, and beautiful ladies are sitting here, because you're going to contribute and know that you have the responsibility to contribute and do it the right way.
We're going to go ahead and go with Christian, Johnny, and then my good friend Omar. And I guess our time is, ran out, but go ahead, Christian.
So real quick, going back to what you were saying, I think about like that man. Yeah, those are him or his cohort people. Those are the people who are writing the history books. You know, that are going into school, even if they're portraying, if it's the right information, just their sentiment behind it, right? Like that's going to come through in the education of it. So this type of stuff becomes really vastly important for us. And it reminds me, like, we have to start taking control of our education systems, right? Writing the historic books that are going to be reflective of the people who dealt with it and the generations who have come through, you know, to come through some of that stuff. And again, that person is probably whatever, like, this is what you need to put in a history book. And it sucks because I don't want to have arguments with those people because it's our people who want to benefit from that, but I don't even know if that's the case, you know, like what makes the history sexy to tell anymore, right? Like I don't know, you gotta get to a place where people care or not as distracted. And so it becomes, I'm glad you can do stuff like that, but and I hope it was able to move him. I think just that story moved us probably more than the whole interaction moved him.
I actually am one that would have just been like, whatever, I kept it moving, so I don't entertain those kinds of people. So that's when the actual shortager, or when they call me Tasha at home.
However, do understand that that isn't how the conversation actually started. So the conversation actually led down that road. So if you will, John.
Well, I always like to remember when I'm teaching and learning that a person's perception constitutes reality. Yes. Right, so I really believe whatever that was. And whenever I present information, it's validate, educate, and motivate. Because I validate that's what you believe, that's what you feel. But let me educate you that there's a lot more behind that story that you don't. And I motivate you to go find that out. And I usually have a way of presenting information to where I don't get much pushback. Right? I present information in a matter of fact kind of way, and I stand firm on my square. But you sometimes time to open up to let people. After I would have said, you know, I appreciate your position, there's a lot more out there that you need to understand, and I motivate you to go and find that.
Dr. Howard, there's a couple of things, and I'll be very brief. One is, I wonder if he's talking about the race card where there was a white water fountain and a black water fountain. I believe those were cards that had titles on it that identified race on who could do what and who couldn't do what. The race card, the red lining, the race card of voting rights, the race card of all the inequities that exist today. More importantly, I probably would have stood with some of my peers and not have entertained it as much because I made a vow to myself to not put my energy into that ignorance, but spend more of my energy uplifting what is the best of black people. Yes. And for me, I would have been like, sir, I'm sorry that you're missing out because many people's lives were saved because some black folk that were scientists worked on the COVID vaccine that we have today that saves thousands of lives. So while you're sitting up here as a scientist saying this, I didn't even have to question your credentials, who validated your credentials to even come up with that. So for me, it would be spending my energy saying, thank you, sir, but I'm about to spend my time with the best of our people right now, celebrating the man that opened the doors to eradicate racism and that question that you just asked.
Well, again, you guys are absolutely right because Vern's always been an educator. And Johnny, you hit it right. I do allow people into that space because, see, the difference between ignorance and stupidity is knowledge. And he needed the knowledge. Now that he has the knowledge, if he chooses not to use it, he's stupid. And I encouraged him to just take and learn some more. I said, you know, our generation, we still have encyclopedias. Don't use Google. Use the encyclopedia. And please don't use WikiLinks or whatever it's called. Wikipedia, there you go.
WikiLinks.
So forget y'all. So on that note, folks, we're going to end here. We're going to ask a good friend of ours, Dr. Reed Hidrick of the Hedrick. I always get the name wrong. Reed, you know I love you.
Yes.
He's with the community, Aurora Community of Faith, and this young man, no matter when I call him and how I call him, he answers and he comes whenever I call him regardless. So, Reed, if you'll close us out with a benediction, and we're going to wrap this up. I want to say thank you to each of you for, please, thank you. Come here. And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize my bride who came tonight and everything. And folks, not only do I not do it alone because of this wonderful team here, however, you'd be surprised. She's not only my sounding board, she's my advisor, she's my rock. She's solid. And I tell you what, and when I find myself going off the cliff, Reed, she pulls me right back in. And so, Miss Annie, we want to say thank you and I love you.
Whoa.
In fact, they said you should have received sainthood and you should have. Read if you will.
And a check.
So just before I pray, thank you for inviting me to this space. I'm honored to be. I'm honored to be here with you. And as I was listening to the Webbs, one of my favorite quotes of Dr. King came to my mind, where he said, human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals.
Absolutely.
And they live that out. You guys are living that out. And I'm happy to tag along now and then. The other piece that it always strikes me is their gentleness, their kindness, and goodness. And I am hoping that I am able to learn from that, to be passionate and to work hard. We're fellow laborers and warriors, in justice, and with that gentleness and goodness. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for these moments together tonight. Thank you for the privilege of being together with friends. Lord, I ask that you would help us to follow Jesus, because it's my belief that this is Jesus' cause, that Dr. King grabbed onto in incredible kinds of way, that the Webbs sort of follow up on him. Help us to walk in their paths in the way that they follow Jesus. Father, I thank you for the privilege of being together here tonight. Give us the determination and the passion for justice and equity, and give us the goodness and the gentleness and the peace that you want us to have. Bless us and use us as we follow you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Bless you. You've been holding that in, huh?
Harass him all day today.